This is High Tea and On the Path series, providing weekly insights and inspirations from the people who move food and beverage culture. This week's High Tea guest is Adam Teeter, New York-based co-founder and CEO of VinePair. Adam and Josh Malin co-founded VinePair 10 years ago, and together they've grown VinePair into the largest multimedia publication about wine, beer, and spirits in America, reaching almost 40 million people a month. Let's hear what Adam's most excited about and looking forward to this week.
The biggest thing that's really inspiring me right now in terms of what's happening in the industry is just how many new people there are to the industry, which means there's so many people out there seeking knowledge. I think what happened with COVID is we lost a lot of really incredible people who, went on to do other things, but had all this wealth of knowledge. And then what the result is we opened back up and we got really fresh and, let's be honest, green new bartenders, new somms, et cetera. People, and those are all people that are now out there seeking knowledge. And I think it's a really cool place to be in, because I think pre-COVID, we had a lot of, there was a lot of press written about how a lot of these people who have now left the industry were kind of gatekeepy and snobby. And so there's such an amazing opportunity now to sort of like remake the industry in a new image that's more inclusive, that's more open, that is giving of knowledge in a much freer way than it was in the past. So I think that is what's really, really exciting in terms of what's happening in the industry right now.
How does that play into how you think about content strategy, how you think about storytelling?
I think it continues to play into our ethos for the last 10 years, which was we always wanted to be, the reason we started VinePair was there wasn't anything out there that we felt we wanted to read that was accessible and that came at the drink space from a place of inclusivity, and that basically came to the drink space and said, we understand that there are these vocabularies that are used that not everyone seems to understand. And so we're going to break it down throughout the course of all of our articles. And we're going to do journalism that looks at the world through the lens of the glass, but also kind of explains politics, economics, interpersonal relationships, et cetera, in a very different way than some of our peer publications. For us, we're lucky that we're now able to sort of be one of those leading voices that's helping to educate this new generation and hopefully, bring about change in the industry in a really positive way. It's allowed us to continue to do lots of really great coverage of what's cool, what's fun. I think Cocktail College is a really great example of that, of, trying to use a podcast to educate members of the industry about these really classic drinks, modern classics, old classics, et cetera. Talk to the bartenders that were involved in creating them, and give people toolkits in order to make better drinks. Same thing with Wine 101, right? I think it's the number one wine education podcast in the country. And that is a podcast that we really have seen has helped to educate a whole new generation of wine professionals. And then, through our articles, try to talk about what is happening in the industry, how people are building drink programs. We have a lot of stuff that's industry facing, a lot of stuff that's consumer facing. We just did a really fun package that was all about how 5 prominent bars across the country are pricing their martinis, and like, where is the actual money going towards that pricing of the martini, right? Like the bar that we talked to in LA, like $6 of each martini they sell is going towards glassware costs, which is kind of crazy. I think people don't think about that, right? So our content strategy sort of has stayed the same for the last 10 years, but we always are trying to tweak it a little bit in order to make sure that it's content that is continuing to help people understand the broader world that we live in through drinks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard you say before, you were obsessed with making wine accessible and sort of really breaking down barriers. And I think that's probably that sort of macro North Star of of the content strategy. As you're talking about sort of next generation, these are questions that you get asked a lot, but it is interesting. I'm interested in the conversation of like gatekeeping, as now you were that person coming into the industry. Like, how have things changed, do you think? Because you said the pandemic sort of leveled the playing field potentially. In some ways, people moved out of the industry, new energy, new enthusiasm, new excitement, although maybe green, move into the industry. But based on when you started this in 2014, how are you seeing things change as sort of these new voices, these new individuals, whether it's a bartender, whether it's someone like myself, who's a podcaster, someone in the media space, because from 2014 to now, 10 years, so much has changed.
I mean, I think you can just look at how it's changed in what was popular then and what is popular now. So like, you saw a lot of things that people thought were going to become trends that never became trends, which is really fascinating. The biggest thing we talk about a lot at VinePair is when we first started the publication, it really was a third in terms of our coverage breakdown of wine, beer, and spirits. But if we're being really honest, in the very beginning, we were covering wine and beer a little bit more because they were both what millennials, especially, and we're millennials, were getting into. What's really insane to me to watch over the course of the 10-year history of the publication is how dominant cocktails have become and how craft beer is really not that exciting anymore. It happened like that, where it just all of a sudden, we would write beer content in the first 3 to 4 years and it would go viral. We'd do 150,000 readers on one article. And it just doesn't happen anymore. That's not what people are excited about. They're really excited about cocktails. And same for wine. And I think craft beer, why it sort of fell out of favor is pretty explainable. It homogenized in terms of everyone's making the same style of beer, and you can get a hazy here and a hazy there. And like the hazy you have in LA at the top hazy brewery probably tastes like the hazy I have in New York at the top hazy brewery. You know what I mean? Like it's just everyone's kind of making the same recipe.
Well, was the market oversaturated? Did we just oversaturate the market with too many brands?
Yes.
Too many products.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And a lot of money and a lot of, and people who all wanted to be breweries, but like didn't fully understand the business model. I think a little bit of that has happened in wine. I think also wine just has continued to fumble the bag. They don't, rosé was like there to be this huge trend. And then again, same thing as what you're saying, right? Everyone flooded the market. And like the problem is once a lot of crappy rosé comes into the market, then everyone then just cheapens everything and people aren't as excited about it. And I think cocktails have this thing where like, as most people are cool with cocktails, even kind of bad cocktails in a weird way right now. Like we just kind of like cocktails. And also I think what we have really understood now is the influence that like, this is my own opinion, but I think that like we're seeing a cocktail renaissance for two reasons. One, it's been there since the early aughts, right? Like people like Sasha Petrosky doing it and really causing it to grow. But then I also really think that like we have undervalued the influence of, especially on millennial generation and younger, on watching Food Network, etc., Top Chef from a very young age, where we started to value makers. And the people behind the bar are actually crafting a cocktail. And so I think as a consumer, we are now, when everything is basically the same price, because high-end hazy IPAs are expensive to make, and you're seeing people sell $36 4-packs. Really high quality wines from California, from small producers, from France, et cetera, are really expensive. And cocktails are as well. But the problem is that as a consumer, we can't see all of the amazing things that went into creating these liquids that are in can and bottle that then just get popped and poured for us at the restaurant. But we can see, a bartender behind the bar making the drink. And so we've come to value that more, I think, as a consumer, and feel like that's worth paying for, which is another reason I think cocktails are just blowing up, because we value that in the same way we value the chef that's making, this incredible ceviche for us, right? And so that to me has been really, really crazy to watch over the last 10 years, that evolution and how much we really do value the bartender as a person with incredible skill who is a real tastemaker, a celebrity, right? I think we thought 10 years ago that like the celebrity somm was going to be a thing. It never was, but there was this feeling that it could be, or that brewers could become celebrities, and they really haven't. But bartenders really have. There are bartenders that are very, very, very famous and have massive followings. Julie Reiner, Toby Caccini, like everyone knows who they are, and people love them and want to go to their bars, and they search and they go to the top 50 list for bars. I mean, I was just in Barcelona on vacation, and I posted on Instagram because it blew me away, the power of top 50, right? We have top 50 and we only have it for bars and restaurants. So
now hotels.
And hotels, it's crazy. Yeah. So like I walked by Paradiso, which was just named the number 2 bar in the world, right? on Top 50. And there was a line that was 50 people long to get into the bar on a Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in the afternoon. People who want to go and sit in a dark bar and have a cocktail because it's the number 2 bar in the world, according to one list, right?
Yeah.
You just don't see that happen to breweries and wine bars, right? No one's saying like, this is the number, because when you think about it, like, what makes it the number 1 wine bar in the world? Because they have a better list than someone else's list. Like, some of the best wine bars that we love in America are actually really great restaurants. Like Four Horsemen's an incredible restaurant with a Michelin star. It has a great wine list and it says it's a wine bar, but come on, it's a restaurant, right? So
some of the best bars are restaurants.
Right?
As well.
Exactly. But with cocktail bars, we've placed value on giving flowers to the bartender and giving them these massive accolades, and the consumer has followed. Mm-hmm. And that's been really crazy to watch.
Yeah, I think it is. I know we're both sort of like students of business and culture in a lot of ways. Looking at how the celebrity chef really came about, over the last 25 years or so, it seems like the bartender was a little bit behind that. Are you seeing sort of culture move in that way as well? Obviously, yes, we're seeing the book deals and the collaborations with brands, but like, how does that continue to evolve?
You're seeing it in 2 ways. One, you're seeing bartenders or bar concepts following the restaurant model, right? So there's, I think now 4 or 5 Dantes around the world. There's massive amounts of Death and Companies, like Death and Company, and they're all, and they all still win awards, right? People tell me, oh, Death and Company LA is better than Death and Company New York, the OG. There's Death and Company DC. I mean, you have Dead Rabbit doing it, right? So I think that is the model they're following, which is really smart. And then you are seeing bartenders get behind drinks brands and either starting them themselves. The most famous of which is Ford's Gin, right? So Simon Ford, really famous bartender in London, starts a gin that now every bartender wants to drink, gets brought by Brown-Forman, makes him a millionaire, like really smart. And you've seen chefs do that as well. And that's what's so different that I've seen between like that compared to brewers or somms. Like I've seen somms try to start things and just like the consumer doesn't care in the same way, right? Like a somm that has a glassware line, cool. I mean, why do you have a glassware line? Like what is it about you that causes you to be able to have a glassware line? Whereas I get that you pour wine into a glass, right? But like the bartender uses this tool every day in a different way, right? So like I'm more likely to trust them and the shaker they've developed that they say they use in all of their properties or whatever. It's really been interesting, but I think in the culture, you're going to see bars and bartenders that are continuing to shape how we go out, how we party, what we're doing. And you'll see larger groups, right? So, in New York, right, it's the Cocktail Kingdom group is one of the most influential groups, and they have Katana Kitten, and they have Super Bueno and The Cabinet, and all these incredible bars. And again, you don't see that in the drink specific space. You see restaurant groups with incredible wine programs or incredible just drinks programs in general, but in the drink space, the only groups you see with this influence are cocktail specific groups.
I'm going to ask you this question, knowing that, like you said, culture shifts so quickly.
Yep.
But in the short term, what you said about sort of what's happening with somms and how they're not quite tipping, is that potentially a cause for concern in the short term for the wine business?
Yeah, I do think it's a cause for concern. I think the problem with COVID is that a lot of restaurants realized they didn't need somms, that their manager could buy the list and that they could quickly educate. They also pared down the list like crazy. The other thing is, we talk about this a bunch in the business writing we do. I think a lot of restaurants recognize that they could price wine at a level that helps them make up a lot of margin they lost. And unfortunately, what they then wind up doing is what we've just talked about, right? They're comparing, you're causing the consumer then to compare a wine to a cocktail because they're basically the same price. And they just do the math in their head and say, well, someone made this and I don't know anyone that made that, so I'm going to buy the cocktail. But I do think it's ultimately a cause for concern because wine needs to be hand sold, right? You need someone to explain to you what the wine is. But I also think, right, we know this from looking at data. Somms were doing a disservice to wine though pre-COVID as well. Like the numbers were already trending not great because there was an embrace of a lot of movements that the consumer actually wasn't that jazzed about, right? The consumer didn't want to drink funky bad wine. They wanted to drink what they liked. And there was a bubble of Somms and especially major markets that were basically telling the consumer those wines sucked. And that's the other difference is like, I think there's a difference in understanding. We see this a lot in the business of, you know, the Somm on the floor compared to the bartender. Like, I think the bartender really understands they just need to make the sale. And it's like, and look, that has changed, that has evolved. And I'm very hopeful this will evolve in the Somm community as well, or at least in the wine community. In the early aughts, you had every single bar in America being like, we're not gonna have vodka on our bar. Vodka's stupid. Right? Vodka's crap. I don't care if you like to drink vodka. I'm not going to make you a vodka cocktail. I'm going to tell you why you should make it with gin. Now you go to almost every single top bar in the country and there's a dirty martini on their menu made with vodka because they all realize they just want to make money.
Yeah.
And they're not, and they don't want to make the consumer feel like shit. And I'm hoping that changes in wine as well, where we say like, look, I'm going to speak ill of a wine. Like, you want to drink Caymus? Fine. It's not for us. Right. I would like to show you other wines, but you want to drink Caymus? I have it. Or I have a wine that's like Caymus. Fine. As opposed, and that's basically what vodka is, right? Is you want to drink vodka? Fine. I would love to get you into like really great tequila or mezcal or gin or whatever. But like, if you want to drink vodka, we have some cocktails for you. And I think we'll hopefully see wine start to do that as we have this new generation coming in and just realizing like, look, at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. It's about hospitality. It's making the customer feel great. And pre-COVID, we were moving into a place, especially with wine, where it wasn't about making the customer feel great. It was about making the person who was on the floor with the ego feel great. And that I'm really glad to see has seemed to have changed.
Wow, it's interesting. You mentioned World's 50 Best and, you know, like other awards. Having been in this space, obviously for a while, but having VinePair for 10 years, are you surprised at sort of the influence of some, and not just 50 Best, but these awards? Are you surprised by it? And ultimately, I have an idea of what's propelling its penetration into culture in a way. But what do you think is, you know, this meteoric rise and really everyone not just looking at the list, but looking at the discovery path? I feel like 50 Best Discovery and even things like James Beard, you know, just being a semifinalist, people see a lift in their business.
Yeah. I mean, it's
fascinating.
Yeah, we get told by wine brands, spirits brands all the time, when we make your 50 best wines of the year, when we make your whatever, we see pops in sales. For our next wave awards, like, you know, we name bar of the year, we're told we see pops in visits. Because people just like third-party validation. I think it's just human nature. I'm not surprised by 50 Best in that it was going to be somebody. Did I think it was going to be 50 Best 10 years ago when it was like very young and starting out? No, because there was a lot of competition. Now, obviously, it makes sense. They have a lot of Pellegrino money. Like it makes, you know, the party they throw is epic. They go across the world for these parties.
They do an amazing job in how they've, you know, really focused on bringing in people from, you know, academy chairs from every part of the world and continuing to do that, and then opening up these, you know, Latin America, Asia. You know, I mean, I think they're doing a phenomenal job. But when I asked that question, I thought my thinking is because people outside of our industry, Adam, don't really go by the lists necessarily. But what I think is people love getting awards. They love getting awards. Okay. This industry loves getting awards. And I think the industry celebrating itself and loving the ability to get awards has permeated culture in a way that like people just adjacent to the industry are going, oh my gosh, my friend so-and-so has the world's 50 best bar. My friend so-and-so. And then that goes to their friends. Whereas people that I know now are literally heading to Antwerp and going, oh, I'm checking out the 50 best discovery. I'm not going to go to one of the 50 best, but I'm going to go to the discovery list, and now using that as their guide. So I think the industry itself, by celebrating itself and has permeated sort of everyone else in a way, and going like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
people get excited to go to the places that everyone else is excited about. And then I also think, what we've had this throughout culture, right? Like our parents read Photos and, Lonely Planet and went on vacation, et cetera. But like we have Google and we have Instagram and we have TikTok, and everyone wants to feel like they're going to a place that is known and they're not wasting their time. We all have precious amounts of time. We're all working. We have limited amounts of income. When we're spending our dollars, we want to make sure we're spending them well. And I think what these lists do is help people feel good about where they're spending their money. What I also think they do in the negative, which we've talked about a bunch, is I do think they set expectations sky high for consumers, which also is really hard to be met, right? Like almost everyone I know who's now been to Double Chicken Please has been critical of it to me. Yeah. I got to go very early on when they opened. I'd been a bunch before they got any accolades. Then we were one of the first publications to give them an accolade, and then they just blew up. And I just think that having been back, the drinks are the same. They're still high. They're still amazing. It's just that now, as a consumer, you go on and be like, well, this is supposed to be the number one bar in North America. And you just have an idea of, you don't even know what that means. Yeah. Like you don't know at all what that means, but it better be.
It better be good. You're
taste like the best sex of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can't. It's a cocktail.
It's not. It's not. Well, sometimes it can, but not all the time.
We do Michelin star food too.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I just had a conversation with Matthew Kaner, and he was like stressing really wanting to be, instead of critics, let's be advocates for each other, which I really vibe with a lot. But it's funny, I was talking to a chef friend who's talking about this exact same thing. He said, imagine having a performance review every single minute of the day. He goes, when you get that job, listen, when you hire so-and-so, after you've hired them, there might be the 3-month or a 6-month performance review or something like that. But you're not then looking at that person every second going, did you do that? Did you do that? There's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with that. And he's like, that's what I'm dealing with my 2 restaurants every single day. It's a and he goes, the more success I get, the more that becomes prevalent as well.
Yeah, totally. And, you have the industry focused reviewers and the industry focused accolades. And then you have Google and Yelp and TripAdvisor and people who just because they didn't like how their water was poured or that the bartender didn't come and serve them fast enough, go and give it 2 stars. And that's horrible to restaurants. Yeah. Horrible. And that's what has people who work in the industry on the edge at all times, because as you said, someone is going to go give you a review for the most minuscule thing and could potentially turn off 3 or 4 people who were like, before I wanted to come here because I'd heard they'd gotten, a great write-up in the LA Times. But now I saw like the most recent Yelp review from someone is 2 stars saying that noodles were cold and the cocktail was diluted. I'm not going to, and now I'm going to take my dollar somewhere else. And that's horrible.
It's tough it's really tough on these businesses and it's very challenging. And so it was a really interesting conversation, hearing that perspective of it's like a performance review and it's so true. Obviously we've talked about sort of Spirits is having a moment, has been having a moment. Mm-hmm. What else is the data telling you? Like when you and your team look at sort of the data, what is it saying?
I love that you asked that question because, one of the biggest things I think that has always set us apart as a publication is we've been very data focused, and we built a data product inside of VinePair called VinePair Insights that pulls in all of the consumption habits that are happening on our site. We're collecting almost 250,000 data points every single day. And we run it through an algorithm to try to figure out what's happening in the industry. And I think like what the data continues to tell us is people are way less seasonally focused on what they want to drink than consume than the industry thinks they are. So one of the biggest points I love to point out to the wine industry is that, yes, obviously in April and May, people start to get interested in rosé, but you see almost the identical pop in interest in rosé amongst consumers. Now, you don't see it in Nielsen data because the wine industry still doesn't put the liquid out for them in November and December. And it makes sense because pink is festive. and they like to drink pink. So, you see a pop in pink champagne, but they're looking for all pink hued wines. And we don't have it for them on the shelf to buy, but they want it. And so I think that's what's really interesting. I've still yet to see a bunch of wine brands embrace that. I would love that. One of the other biggest things we're seeing in the data, which a lot of people have talked about, you're seeing elsewhere besides our data, is just this oncoming onslaught of the spritz. I think it has morphed from being a one cocktail Aperol to a category. And that happens very rarely in drinks, right? It's usually one brand owns that drink in a lot, right? The Negroni blew up, but can we be honest? It's probably not a Negroni without Campari. It's a Campari cocktail. That's our position here, right? There's a lot of other indie producers making some cool Campari dupes, but like it's a Campari cocktail. But the martini is a category. The Manhattan is a category in that you can kind of play with it, and you can do lots of different martinis, and you're seeing that with the spritz, and it's really fascinating. Aperol basically, with marketing dollars, built this category in the US. And now you're seeing it with interest in, like, there's a brand we work with a lot in New York called Limone. They have a lemon flavored spritz that's really delicious. You have the Hugo spritz with, that's blow. I mean, I saw all over Europe, and it's definitely, Saint Germain, it's going to come here. Like, people just like spritzes. And I think that's going to be fascinating because that's going to keep building. And then the other thing we're seeing in the data, which I think comes as no surprise, is just like the unstoppable rise of all things agave. Everything agave. I mean, you guys were at the forefront, right? California was really ahead of the agave 100%. Trend. And it's now, it's really national. Now, do I think it's going to go global? No. I have a lot of reservations about that, just based on our cultural connection to Mexico and to limes and things like that I think cause us to be much more receptive to agave as a product. I think Europe is much more receptive to Scotch and gin and things like that. But I do think that here it's unstoppable. I mean, it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And you're even now, the interest in mezcal is way up, and it's that to me is super cool because it's also something that's so close to our own country that we get to sort of take part in. And it's a cuisine. It's the most popular cuisine in America. So come on.
What about non-alcoholic? What are you seeing?
So I think non-alcoholic, we always say you really have to dig through the noise. So non-alcoholic is really one category, and it's beer, and it's athletic. And they are, they just raised $50 million more. Like, they're a behemoth. I saw that. But it's beer. If you look at anything else happening in non-alcoholic, nothing is anywhere close to beer. And almost everyone who is consuming non-alcoholic, when you look at consumer behavior, is consuming it as a way to pace. So we don't see this massive rise of actually people choosing to quit drinking. What we see is people choosing to moderate drinking through non-alc. And I think that messaging would actually help the entire non-alcoholic industry as well. I think a lot of the non-alcoholic industry says, don't drink this instead. I think if it said moderate with us, it would be a better conversation to have with people who'd be like, oh, cool. Then yeah, I'll drink an athletic while I'm out with my friends after I had a beer, so I can have another beer after having the athletic. That is where, and that's where I think beer athletic is doing so well, because they are doing that, right? And they're having that conversation with people. There's lots of, backyard parties I've been to this summer where there'll be a cooler full of beer, and there's probably 24 athletics in the cooler. And I see people, they'll drink a beer and then they'll go have an athletic because they want to still be social, but they don't, they're older, hangovers suck, they might have kids. Like, there's a lot of different reasons, right? And so they'll pace. But I don't know a lot of people, and also we don't see it in the data, who are just like only athletic drinkers or only any of these non-alc wines and things. And I think also in the non-alc space, what we found through all of our trials is it's just really hard to get non-alc that's not beer to taste like the alcohol that it's saying it is. Non-alc wine is really, really, really difficult because you strip it out of so much stuff when you run it through the cone spinner. The stuff that's like kind of being made with vinegar and things like that, you have to be into drinking kombucha at that point in time. non-alc spirits is really hard. I mean, just being at BCB, I mean, I had a producer just admit to me he was making non-alc gin. He's like, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, dude, it's infused water. Like, I mean, it just is. It's flavored water. And you're asking a consumer to pay $45 for a 750 milliliter of flavored water when they can buy LaCroix or Spindrift. Like, that's a hard case to make. But I mean, and I'm not giving an ad for Athletic. I'm just saying, dude, it tastes like IPA.
Yeah.
Like, it does. It tastes like real beer. And so consumers, I think, are like, this is very easy to switch into drink when I don't want to drink a beer, because it still tastes like the beer that I'm drinking. I'm not really missing a whole lot. I can just have that IPA. I'm even getting most of the calories. But, you know, that's where I think non-alc is really hard, and why we're going to continue to see things like, you know, the Boy Son going out of business and stuff like that. I think we're going to see more of that, because there's obviously interest in the category, but I think the media, and I don't mean the drinks media, I mean the larger media of, you know, mainstream publication, you know, generalist publications, fashion publications, et cetera, really, you know, wrote all these pieces that non-alc was going to be this huge movement and huge thing without looking at data. And I think a lot of people rush with money in to try to invest in this space that no one had validated with actual consumer data. And I think a lot of stuff's going to go out of business.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Adam, how do people best connect with you?
So you can connect with me on VinePair, at VinePair, on all of our socials. VinePair.com is the publication. And then you can follow me at Adam Teeter on Instagram. That's basically where I do anything. But yeah, we'd love to have any new people as readers. If you are a reader, thank you very much. We would not be where we are today without the audience. So we're appreciative of it every single day.
I love that, man. Thanks so much for being a part of our community. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
On the Pass is hosted and produced by me, Gabriel Ornelas, and edited and mixed by Dylan Agajanian, with original music by Dylan Agajanian.